Don't you dare touch me. The sharp voice cut through the cozy hum of the restaurant like a glass shattering on the floor. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks paused halfway to mouths, and the soft music playing in the background suddenly felt out of place. All eyes turned toward the corner booth by the window. There sat a woman, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair neatly tied back, her posture straight, her eyes calm but fiery. She had been sitting alone, enjoying a quiet dinner, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a book propped open beside her plate. She looked like she had come from a long day of travel, dressed simply in jeans and a jacket. But now, her peace had been interrupted. Standing over her were three men. They looked like the kind of trouble that people instinctively avoided, loud, restless, half-drunk, and carrying an air of arrogance. The tallest of them leaned down with a smirk plastered on his face, one hand reaching toward her arm. "Relax, sweetheart," he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "We're just being friendly." The woman's gaze didn't waver. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink back. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye, calm as a still lake. That kind of calmness was unnerving. It was the kind that came from someone who had faced storms much bigger than this. Other diners whispered nervously, their faces showing the same thought. Somebody should step in. But nobody moved. Fear, as it always did, held them in their seats. After all, these men were big. They were loud. They were trouble. And she was just one woman. But what nobody in the room knew, what even the three men hovering over her didn't know, was that this woman wasn't ordinary at all. Her name was Lieutenant Maya Torres, a decorated officer of the United States Navy. She had spent years in the service, training for situations where hesitation meant death, where calm under pressure wasn't a choice, but survival. She had been in dangerous waters, had stared enemies in the face, had led her team through missions most civilians could never imagine. And now, here in this small-town restaurant, three arrogant men thought they had cornered an easy target. One of them chuckled, leaning against her table. "What's the matter? Don't like company? A pretty girl like you shouldn't eat alone." The waiter, a young man barely out of his teens, nervously hovered nearby, trying to muster courage. Sirs, please," he stammered. "Let the lady enjoy her meal." The tallest one shoved him aside, his chair clattering against the floor. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Maya's eyes narrowed. She closed her book slowly, placed it neatly on the table, and rested her hands in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was low but firm, like steel wrapped in silk. The tallest of the three men leaned in even closer, his breath sour with alcohol, his voice dropping into a low growl that carried across the silent restaurant. "You think you're too good for us, huh?" His words dripped with hostility, his smirk fading into something darker. His friends laughed crudely, emboldened by the attention. One of them shifted his body into the aisle, blocking the only path out. The other leaned against the booth, drumming his fingers on the edge of her table, knocking over her water glass in the process. Cold liquid spread across the wood, soaking the pages of her book. "Oops," he sneered. "Guess I made a mess. Maybe you'll need a strong man to clean it up." A few people in the restaurant gasped, but still, no one dared to move. Fear worked like chains around their ankles. The waiter who had tried to intervene earlier stood frozen near the counter, his hands trembling. The manager peeked nervously from the kitchen door, clearly debating whether to call the police or hope the situation fizzled out on its own. Maya Torres sat there, silent, her jaw tightening as the men continued their taunts. Her fingers flexed once under the table. She wasn't rattled. She was calculating. Every movement, every angle, every possible reaction was already playing in her mind like a chessboard. The tall one slammed his palm on the table, rattling her plate. "Come on, beautiful. Dance with us. Or are you scared?" That was when Maya moved. Not with her fists. Not with her training. Not yet. She calmly picked up a napkin, dabbed at the spilled water, and set it aside. Then, she slowly stood up, her eyes level with the three men. Her voice was steady, almost too quiet for the situation, but it carried the weight of authority. "You have exactly 5 seconds to leave me alone." The men laughed uproariously. One clapped his friend on the back. 5 seconds. "Oh, this one's feisty." The leader grinned and leaned forward, his face inches from hers. "And what happens after 5 seconds, princess?" Maya's lips curved in the faintest smile, but her eyes, sharp, unwavering, unblinking, made something in him falter for a brief second. Then, she said softly, "I'll make you regret staying." The restaurant went dead silent. Even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to pause. Everyone knew something was about to happen. The men, however, couldn't see the storm they were about to unleash. Instead, they chuckled again, mistaking her composure for weakness. One of them cracked his knuckles. "Let's teach this girl a lesson." Maya's hand brushed against the edge of the table. Her body shifted into stance, not obvious, not flashy, just subtle enough that anyone trained in combat would recognize it instantly. The countdown had ended, and for the three men, the clock had just run out. The first man lunged. It happened fast. His hand shot out, aiming to grab her wrist and yank her closer. To him, it was a simple move. To Maya Torres, it was sloppy, predictable, almost laughable. In one fluid motion, she pivoted on her heel, her arm twisting his wrist at an unnatural angle. Before he could even register what was happening, his body was airborne. Crash! He slammed onto the polished hardwood floor with a thud that echoed through the silent restaurant. Plates rattled on nearby tables. He cried out in pain, clutching his arm, eyes wide with shock. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Did you see that?" But Maya wasn't done. The second man, startled, swung wildly, throwing a clumsy punch meant for her jaw. Maya ducked smoothly, her movements sharp and efficient like she had rehearsed them 1,000 times, which she had, in combat drills far harsher than this. Her legs swept low across the floor, hooking his ankles. His feet left the ground. Wham! He landed hard on his back, the air rushing out of his chest in a strangled gasp. He rolled on the floor, groaning, completely stunned that a woman half his size had just taken him down in seconds. The last man hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to realize he was in over his head, but not long enough to back down. Fueled by embarrassment and rage, he charged at her from behind, hoping to overpower her with brute force. Big mistake. Maya sensed him coming before his footsteps even closed the gap. She sidestepped at the last moment, using his own momentum against him. Grabbing the back of his jacket, she twisted her body with precision and hurled him forward. Crash! He collided with the corner table, sending glasses shattering to the ground. Red wine spilled like blood across the floor, dripping from the tablecloth. He groaned, dazed and unable to get back up. And just like that, it was over. The restaurant, which had been holding its breath, finally exhaled in a collective gasp. In less than 15 seconds, three men, loud, confident, dangerous, were sprawled on the ground, moaning in pain and clutching their bruises. The grandmother by the counter crossed herself. A young man whispered, That was like a movie." But Maya wasn't posing, wasn't basking in attention. Her stance was still ready, her eyes scanning the room as if more attackers might come. Old habits from the Navy. Always assess, always anticipate, never assume the fight is finished. The men struggled to stand, red-faced and humiliated. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced by disbelief. They had thought they were predators. But in those 15 seconds, they realized something terrifying. They weren't hunters. They were prey. And the woman they'd chosen to harass was no ordinary target. She was trained, disciplined, and more dangerous than any of them could imagine. The silence hung heavy. All eyes were on Maya. And for the first time since it all began, she finally spoke. The three men groaned, struggling to get up. Chairs were knocked over, glass shards littered the floor, and the once cozy restaurant now felt like the scene of a barroom brawl. But the strangest part? The woman at the center of it all, Maya Torres, looked completely composed. Her breathing was steady, her stance relaxed. To her, this wasn't chaos. It was control. One of the men, his pride more bruised than his body, staggered to his feet and pointed at her with a trembling hand. His voice cracked with equal parts fear and anger. "What the hell are you?" Maya adjusted her jacket with slow precision, as if brushing off invisible dust. Her eyes swept across the three of them, then across the stunned crowd who still hadn't found the courage to move. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying that calm authority that only comes from years of command. "My name," she said, "is Lieutenant Maya Torres, United States Navy." The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the room. A man at the bar whispered, "She's military." Another diner murmured, "I knew she wasn't normal." The three men froze, their bravado cracking further with every syllable. Maya took a deliberate step forward. I've spent years defending this country, protecting people who can't protect themselves. I've stood face to face with real enemies, men who thought they could intimidate me just like you did tonight. Do you know what happened to them? Her eyes narrowed, her tone sharpening like steel. They lost. Every single time. Silence. No laughter. No mockery. Just the weight of her words pressing on the room. The manager rushed forward, wringing his hands nervously. Lieutenant, ma'am, I don't know how to thank you. You may have prevented something much worse tonight. Maya shook her head. Don't thank me. Thank the people who raised you to respect others. These men clearly weren't taught the same. The tallest of the three attackers, his face pale, tried to salvage his pride. We were just joking around. Maya's expression turned cold. No. Joking is when everyone laughs. What you did was harassment. And if you ever lay a hand on another woman again, you won't just be dealing with me. You'll be dealing with the law. The line hit like a gavel slamming in a courtroom. The men exchanged panicked glances. Suddenly, the boldness that had fueled them minutes earlier evaporated. They stumbled toward the door, muttering excuses, limping from the bruises she'd left behind. Not a soul in the restaurant stopped them. No one needed to. They left behind more than broken glass. They left behind their reputation, shattered beyond repair. As the door swung shut behind them, a little girl near the counter tugged on her mother's sleeve. Her eyes were wide, filled with awe. "Mommy," she whispered, "she's like a superhero." Maya's lips twitched into the faintest smile. But deep inside, she wasn't celebrating. She hadn't wanted to fight tonight. She had only wanted peace. But peace, she knew, wasn't always given. Sometimes, peace had to be protected. The restaurant was still buzzing with shock after the three men stumbled out into the night. Broken glass lay scattered across the floor, the smell of spilled wine lingering in the air. But in the center of it all stood Maya Torres, calm, composed, as if she hadn't just dismantled three men in under 15 seconds. She exhaled slowly and returned to her table, picking up her book from the wet surface. The pages were ruined, crinkled with water, but she didn't seem to care. She set it aside, sat down, and picked up her fork. To her, the fight was over. To everyone else, it was only just beginning to sink in. One by one, the customers began to move again. A man in a business suit approached first, his voice shaky but full of admiration. "Ma'am, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like it." A young mother with her daughter followed, her eyes glistening. "Thank you." The manager insisted on comping her meal, but Maya refused politely, leaving enough cash on the table to cover the damage caused by the fight. She didn't want to be treated as a hero. She only wanted fairness. As she slipped on her jacket, the grandmother who had been watching from the corner called out softly, "Bless you, child. You remind me there's still good in this world." Maya gave her a respectful nod, then pushed open the restaurant door. The cool night air greeted her, carrying the distant sounds of the city. She walked out without looking back, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the restaurant lights behind her. Inside, the diners knew they would tell this story again and again. Not about three drunk men who tried to cause trouble, but about the woman who taught them a lesson in 15 seconds. A Navy officer who showed that true power isn't in intimidation. It's in discipline, respect, and the courage to stand when others remain seated. For Maya, it was just another night. For everyone else, it was unforgettable.